Yes, welcome back after the short commercial break. On behalf of GCPIT India and Africa, I extend a warm welcome to our panelists, Ms. Arita Vinakota, Ms. Nomza Teleko, Mr. Sudhil David, Mr. Syam Madanapalli, and our moderator, Ms. Rajashri Rao.
Hello.
This panel on enabling digital transformation with IoT will be led by Ms. Rajashri. Ms. Rajashri is a globally acclaimed industry thought leader, visionary, advisor, principal consultant, and mentor in next generation technologies with over 20 years in the corporate across the regions such as India, US, and Asia Pacific. She is the head of AI Innovation Hub and Partnerships and Ecosystems for R2 Data Labs at Rolls-Royce. And Ms. Rajashri brings with her the diverse industry experience of working with IBM, Intel, and SAP, leading and influencing the technology adoption within the Singapore government and public sector for the building smart city and smart nation initiatives in the Asia Pacific region. Also, I would like to give a brief introduction on the panelists before I hand it over to our moderator. And we also have with us Ms. Arita. She comes with 13 years of experience spread across sales, consulting, and delivery of digital engagements and engineering services. She's a client-focused, result-driven, industry-agnostic sales leader with extensive experience in working with cross-cultural, cross-functional teams, creating the right partnerships ecosystem, developing compelling propositions and closing deals. And she has worked with Bosch Automotive, Cognizant Digital, and now at Hitachi High-Tech in IoT and engineering space in European markets. Next, I would like to introduce Ms. Nomza Teleko. She is the owner and chief executive officer of OS Holdings. OS is an award-winning technology firm that specializes in business, ERP, internal controls, and financial management systems. She has developed a management team that strives to ensure the OS Holdings is a leader in the industry. Ms. Nomza founded two subsidiary companies named OS Alpha, and the company that focuses on helping SMEs grow through business acceleration and automating internal process. OS Cares Foundation, a nonprofit organization that aims to curb poverty through education, ICT, and agriculture. Welcome, Ms. Namza. And then next up, we have Mr. Sunil David. So Mr. Sunil has 26 of experience in the IT and telecom industry and is currently the regional director for IoT for AT&T India and is based out of Chennai. He is responsible for building the IoT strategy for India and the ASEAN region and working with various internal stakeholders to ensure successful execution, working on building a robust partner ecosystem for AT&T in the entire IoT value chain, which includes devices, platforms, and applications. On 7th February 2020, Mr. Sunil was awarded as India's fastest growing leaders 2019 to 20 Pride of the Nation at the 13th edition of the Asian Business and Social Forum at Bangkok. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure being part.
And last but not least, we have with us Mr. Syam Madanapalli. Mr. Syam leads the IoT services at NTT Data Services and subject matter expert for the Internet of Things. He co-authored a book on all IP networks, received 18 patents, written 8 RFC standard for the Internet at IETF, and contributed to various standards at IEEE and other SDOs. Mr. Syam led the team that developed world's first IPv6 Ready Logo certified TCP and IPv6 stack. Mr. Syam is also the proposer and chair of IEEE P1931.1, the roof computing, which is a new standard for the IoT. So yeah, that's all the introductions, and welcome, Mr. Syam. And with that, I offer the floor to our moderator, Ms. Rajashri.
Thank you so much for the introductions, and thank you. And it's a privilege, and literally very happy to be part of this session and being moderating with the esteemed panelists from the industry. Quite excited, and I'm looking forward to hearing their views on different things within the IoT space. So, with that, I would just begin to say that Internet of Things is essentially a unified goal towards creating a completely connected world where devices and people can communicate in a moment's notice. Now, the top tech businesses around the world are continuously innovating and trying to come up with the next great connected devices. So this whole world is going to be connected, and thanks to IoT, which is playing a very integral part. And just to quote a few numbers from what they had envisioned or predicted last year, saying that what 2020 was supposed to be, right? So it was predicted by the IDC, Gartner, and quite a few of them that in 2020 the Internet of Things would generate an additional dollar 344 billion in revenue, and also drive about 177 billion in cost reductions. But given this year posed a huge challenge and things were unprecedented and nobody expected a pandemic, I know it has taken a lot of hit in terms of how the business itself literally came to a standstill, lot of halt, and too many things that happened. But I want to open up certain questions, beginning with technology itself. Now, within IoT space, there are different technology, and also IoT itself is a very robust, or I would say it's one of the underpinning platforms. It could be platform, or it could be services, or it could be product. Now, it's a technology which is underpinning the how the world would get connected, the devices. So I will open up to Sunil to kickstart and to explain a bit from your experience as to how IoT is going to enable or be an enabler in the technology advancement.
Right. Thank you, Rajeshri, for that question. So, as you mentioned, IoT. If you just look at the IoT stack, you start with connectivity. Before the connectivity, of course, you have the IoT device. You need to make sure that you have the right device that is engineered for that use case. And in the IoT world, there's never a one-size-fits-all solution. Every case is unique, so you got to have the right device. Connectivity, of course, is important, and then, of course, you're sending the data to a platform where you're ingesting it, aggregating it, visualizing it. Then, of course, you're trying to orchestrate that into cloud environment. So, now when you look at the whole stack, connectivity is very, very, very important, right? I mean, you might have the best possible IoT device, you might have the best possible platform, but if you do not have reliable and secure connectivity, then obviously the application is not going to work. And given that I represent the telecom industry, I wanted to emphasize the importance of connectivity uh, as far as the initial comments are concerned. And when you look at connectivity, the options for connectivity today are far more compared to what was in the past. Now, if you just look at cellular connectivity, 2G, 3G, 4G, most research has shown that most of the IoT connections today are using cellular, and it is not surprising given that from a coverage standpoint, cellular is the best choice. Most of the assets are all moving, a lot of them are moving cars, vehicles, fleets, etc. So cellular is widely used today. In fact, the research says that more than 60% of all connected devices today are using cellular.
Right.
Now, cellular being one option, but over the last few years, we started to see a lot more other options coming into play. So, for example, short range communications, you have a BLE, and then you have Wi-Fi 6, which is optimized for IoT applications. You'll probably start seeing a lot more Wi-Fi 6 being deployed going forward. Then, of course, satellite. In fact, I come from a satellite communications background, and I've actually seen how the cost of satellite connectivity has come down. The cost of satellite devices, receivers are much lower today. And we'll probably see going forward maybe a lot more use of satellite communication because, a lot of the providers today are trying to build, these low Earth orbit satellites, which orbit about 600 kilometers above Earth's surface. So we'll probably see a lot more use of satellite going forward. The cost of devices would come down further, and so that could be a potential option, especially in locations which are very, very remote, which cannot be addressed to cellular. But having talked about traditional cellular like 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G in the future, and also short range and then satellite, the one which is really going to propel IoT adoption would be low power WAN technologies. And if you look at low power WAN technologies, there are two different options today. So one, you can use unlicensed spectrum like LoRa and Sigfox, which is widely used today. The other option is using licensed spectrum following 3GPP standards, which is NB-IoT and LTM, narrowband IoT and LTM, which is also called CAT-M1. Now, we already started to see a lot more NB-IoT deployments globally. So while we are seeing LTM and NB-IoT, we are seeing a lot more carriers gravitate towards NB-IoT. And NB-IoT, the nature of the technology, I mean, it's the characteristics of it. One is that it is very good for use cases where you're sending very less amount of data. So any use case which is for just reporting the condition of an asset, temperature or pressure or whatever, or even smart metering applications, amount of data that you're sending is very, very less, just meter readings, right? So there are enough or more use cases where the amount of data that you need is very less. You really don't need very high speed. Latency is not so important. And the frequency at which you're sending data to the cloud is also not so much. And so one is that. Secondly, the cost of the NB-IoT device is also going to be much, much lower. The module costs are going to come down even further. So one is, the fact that for use cases where you're just reporting condition, NB-IoT is the best choice. And more importantly, the cost of the module is going to be much, much lower, because that will definitely drive a lot more adoption. Because if you just look at when you architect an IoT solution, a lot of the cost is in the hardware, right? And IoT being capex heavy, that sometimes can be a barrier when it comes to adopting it. And when you're able to bring the cost of the device down thanks to NB-IoT, the module's cost will fall even further. And plus features like, it can go into power saving mode. When you're not reporting the status of an asset to the cloud, it can go into power saving mode, right? So all that is possible with NB-IoT. And even from an India standpoint, we started to see operators now slowly test NB-IoT solutions. Vodafone and Airtel have already started to test it. And I would say that maybe from early next year, we'll start to see more of NB-IoT deployment in India. And that will also pick up globally, because I would say more than 40 to 50 carriers have already started to implement NB-IoT. And that will really propel the growth of IoT adoption, not just in India, but anywhere else in the world. And then, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then very quickly, and when you have 5G, which will probably take a year or two when we get it in India, 5G being access agnostic, it will seamlessly integrate with the NB-IoT. And then this whole, the advantage of massive machine type communications where you can have 1 million devices in a 1 square kilometer radius. 5G plus NB-IoT together, I think that will drive far more adoption perhaps in the future. So those are my initial comments, Rajesh.
That's really insightful as to at least, and also coming from a telecom background, at least you know what's happening in that world and how adoption is being happening, what are the developments. But thanks for that quick insight. That's really helpful. We'll go over to Harita, since you're from Hitachi, and I know Hitachi is into quite different things, right? So would you just want to just give a little bit insight from how the technology adoption or developments is that you are seeing, despite the challenge that it's the way the things have been disrupted this year?
Sure. So I just want to add one thing to what Mr. Sunil said. I found that very interesting when he spoke about the different components within the IoT stack itself, right? Because AT&T, for example, is a master in terms of connectivity, and Hitachi, the unit that I work for, we have a very niche platform that we own, and there could be another company which has a point solution, and there could be other companies which are making very specific sensors for specific industries or use cases. I just wanted to extend on that point, saying that now we are seeing use cases which are not just pure IoT, they are AI powered IoT. Along with that, they want an element of augmented reality, and then they want an element of robotics. They want a 5G private network because they want it to be secure and they want to use the bandwidth, etc. And in the future, maybe 10 years from now, quantum compute will also become a big thing. So in that respect, if I heard Mr. Sunil's background right, he has built ecosystems with GSIs and platform partners, right? So this whole thing of creating the right partner ecosystems will become extremely important. And when we are creating these partner ecosystems, one of the key things will be creating products and solutions which have open interfaces, so that we can all, work in a cohesive and seamless manner together. So that's one key trend I'm seeing. In Europe, one of the biggest problems or barriers that we have to face is the first question any customer asks us, even when we get into the room after discussing the use cases, how quickly can I get return on investments? So that's a tricky question for us because nobody wants to be a first adopter. Europe, for probably all the right reasons, is a bit, risk averse, which means they don't want to jump into the solution right away. So they would like to start with a pilot. Now, on a pilot, as you may understand, it's pretty hard to give a return on investment, right? A return on investment only comes when you ramp up, when you scale up, and then when people actually adopt the challenges and there is open interfaces. I think probably Shyam will know a lot more about all of these open interfaces and how to integrate between different elements and things like that. And the other challenge we face is change management, of course. Even if you roll out the best solution with everything in place, if human beings are not going to adopt the technology, nothing is going to happen. And specifically in the European market and Germany, we have a big skill crunch as well. In comparison with what the economy needs, the skills that we have, the number of engineers who come out with IoT skills, data science skills, with full stack developers, it's not matching up. There is a big gap as well. And on top of that, since my field especially, we are in industrial IoT, so we work quite a bit with the shop floor. It's very important that if I'm working with a Polish company, I need somebody who can speak Polish, along with being an excellent engineer, understanding the domain. He should also be a Polish, he should be able to speak in Polish. So those are some big challenges that we face currently. And the other thing I wanted to add on to what Mr. Sunil said was, apart from the hardware itself, licensing cost is also pretty heavy when you look at the whole package. I think where we may have a bit of an advantage as compared to hardware providers is we can still convince the customer saying that, this is a licensing model, you pay as you go. But that's probably not something that hardware developers have the luxury of. So that would be my addition to it.
But thank you. I think you made some of the very interesting points, especially covering in terms of the return on investment, the skill perspectives, and also the adoption. If I, as a customer, is not going to adopt, and also it's a little cost heavy, the capex heavy, and how we going to adapt. That's an interesting. And most important, you talked about also the in the Western world, it's also the language barrier. It's all like how do you build all. It's quite interesting, but I'll come back to that probably a little. We'll deep dive into that when I'm talking about the challenges. But that's all very good to set the stage. Over to Shyam. I know entity data is into a different networking services and many areas, right? Again, I'm sure IoT is one of the biggest focus. So what is it you see as like the same question in terms of the technology, the adoption, and have you seen how it has evolved or where we are and how it's going to evolve in your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we are also system integrators, right?
Right.
So currently, probably we also see a traction in the manufacturing more than any other vertical. Probably the second most, probably the vertical that we see traction is the healthcare, right? But I think you asked about how the technology is evolving, right? Probably I want to mention a couple of points here. I want to start with the internet, because that's where I started somewhere in 2002 to develop the IPv6 standard for connecting large number of devices. Right? So the internet is evolving to be able to connect billions and trillions of devices. Probably internet is the most innovative and massive network ever created by the humans. Right? And also, in the human evolution, I think internet is the only technology we call it like type 1 civilization. By the way, we are in type 0 civilization still. Right? So even few billions of connections transformed the way we work today, the way we live. Right now, imagine with the Internet of Things, with billions to trillions of devices connected to the internet. Probably it will completely change the way probably we live and work. So this is what when I teach IoT, what is the kind of end goal for the Internet of Things as a technology? So for me, a sufficiently advanced IoT, when really deployed in the future, it is no less than a god, right? It can even respond to your thoughts, right? That's where we head with the Internet of Things, right? So in terms of the actual, the practical deployments, probably I think edge computing is the one that's evolving as a new technology typical for connecting the IoT towards the networks. So we see a lot of interest and also the need, I mean, right? Especially when we are talking about the shop floors in the manufacturing industry. I mean, so it is not that you simply connect some of the machines or to the internet and you get the data and you do analytics. It doesn't work there. I mean, right? So edge computing probably will play a crucial role. This is the area where we see a lot of things happening. I mean, including myself. I mean, we are driving a new standard at IEEE called the P1931 called roof computing. I mean, so basically, roof computing, the way we arrived at is that, because there are clouds, people are doing cloud computing, and somebody found that there is a fog below the clouds, and they wanted to do the fog computing. Then I was thinking, what is there below the fog? And I wanted to do that computing, right? One day I found that we have the roofs below the fog. So we said we will do the roof computing. That's how we created the standard. But we looked at the kind of roof. What is the roof that plays a role in the human evolution? I mean, we found that even the primitive man was using caves as the roof to kind of secure himself from the wild animals and the weather. I mean, right? So roof is the way that we as a family to secure every day, right? So because we are very weak when we position against even the sun or the weather, right? So Internet of Things are also very similar, right? They are very weak when we position those things on the internet against the hackers. So we felt that there is a need for shielding these devices to be able to secure from the hackers. So we need to roof them, right? So that's the edge computing we are working. And also the important thing to understand on the edge computing is to understand how is the IoT plays a role in general, right? So IoT as a technology is all about ability to build what context the physical world is going on, right? So to build that context, and each context has certain actions that to be taken up. But as a humans, we have the knowledge to be able to build several contexts, because the number of contexts that happen in the physical world is unlimited. We cannot define it. So how does the Internet of Things will determine what context is happening exactly? Because the number of contexts are not fixed. So how does this edge would evolve on, right? So this is something probably new that any IoT application developers should be looking at, and I see a lot of potential for even new companies to innovate on that aspect.
Thank you. That is a good thing, and I can completely agree with you on the edge computing, the need of, and what's the standard that needs to come. Also, more important, because with the connected devices and also with the pandemic, the more we have gone virtual, I see more data is coming in. So one of the challenge that's also posing is the data management itself. What do they do with so much more data coming in, right? So we'll touch base upon that, and we'll definitely ask you more questions around that part. Moving to Nomsa, please share your perspective and what do you think and see how the technology is evolving, and what are the areas that you see things are going to be transforming within IoT space. No, Ms. Nomsa, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Rajashi, for the opportunity. And also, I mean, I'm really excited to be part of this team that is taking IoT. The biggest thing for us, I mean, how do we then use the IoT technology, to deliver the promise of ensuring that socially, humans are not necessarily excluded, where technology is concerned. How do we then use IoT in delivering the promise of economic and social and economic development in places like sustainable agriculture, healthcare, government? How do we then also look at becoming one in ensuring that the UN Sustainable Development Goals are solved, or we can solve some of the challenges that we face, especially in Africa, and use technology to achieve that. Because the research shows, I was looking at the Machina research in 2013 that states that in 2020, 1.9 trillion 1.9 trillion global economic value will be created by 2020. Obviously, with the pandemic, we're really not sure where those figures are, but it also indicates to say 26 billion embedded devices, an intelligence system by 2020, it will be happening. So there is no turning back. Technology is here, and organizations, companies, they need to be taking advantage of the available technology. So in our space, be it the ERP space, we need to ensure, or we've ensured that we use technology, IoT, in ensuring that our customers, they're getting the value of the money and of the spend. Look at the manufacturing processes, and we look at the logistic processes. How do we then use IoT in making sure that the clients are getting the value for their money? But the exciting part for me is when you take IoT and you are integrating with artificial intelligence. Obviously, globally, we've been experiencing the pandemic of COVID-19. How can we then use IoT, artificial intelligence, in making sure that a vaccine can be distributed globally, with speed, efficiency, as ensuring that this vaccine are delivered, they're still in a good space. How do we then integrate logistics and making sure that we are able to deliver value? I see it growing at that perspective to say, how do we take back humanity? How do we ensure that humans and machines are able to work very well together in actually bringing back quality of life to humans? That is really where my perspective is, because we're saying that IoT promises, it promises fully connected smart world. So there's that relationship between objects, environment, and people. It's really intertwined. And how do we ensure that, as well as SMMEs are not left behind in the technologies? And how do they use IoT as their strategic growth and recovery plan post the COVID pandemic? In our space, we look at your crop management and in smart farming. We've seen situations where we use IoT to do your soil testing, your weather forecast, the logistics around that. So those are some of the things that we need to look at to say we need to use digital transformation. We need to use technology to ensure that businesses continue to grow, because the technology is there, but I think there's a great fear and there's knowledge gap in terms of using it. And the biggest challenge, especially when you're looking in the African continent, is there's electricity. How do we ensure? I mean, you can have the best technology in the world, but if people have no power to access that technology, it really makes no sense. How to ensure that people have internet, small businesses have internet so that they are in a position to use the technology that is available. The pandemic has shown a great divide, where digital transformation is concerned. I'll make an example where you had children continuing to attend classes that are in suburban areas, whereas you have children in the rural areas that are in the township that do not have access to attending remote classes. So those are some of the things when we're talking technology. How do you ensure that it benefits the human nature? How to ensure that every home or every business has access to it, so that we can create the technology solutions, or we can add value to the solutions that are required. So my space is in around those lines to say, let's use technology to bring back humanity. Let's use technology to ensure that many organizations are succeeding and they can actually grow and overcome the ills that were caused by the COVID pandemic.
Thank you, Nomsa. I think that's a very interesting points that you mentioned, especially around how IoT leveraging AI is again going to be able to help do the data analytics and also predict a lot of things, and within supply chain and healthcare and few others. we'll definitely come back. And most important point that you mentioned about how do you have the connectivity or electricity, at least in terms of South Africa, because education has to go seamless, whether it's not necessary that children in the urban area is privileged, or it has to be like everybody's inclusive, nobody should be exclusive of this. And how does technology help? Very thought provoking. We'll come back on that. So with that, back to Sunil, given the interest of time as well, I want to make sure that I cover the headings and get maximum out of the panelists. I'll club two questions here, and I would like you to all, quick, not take more than 3 minutes, because that we can go on at least two rounds more, and we will conclude. And I don't know if or there's any questions from the audience, and we will also do some Q&A. So with that, I would like to ask, one is on what has been the case studies that where there has been certain very critical or significant application of IoT itself, or also how has COVID leveraged the IoT technology? How has IoT technology itself helped during COVID, this pandemic, and enabled and expedited some of the adoptions? So you could pick this as a case study, anything that you're free to, and there's no need for any specific customers to be called out, but you just can talk about the case study itself and how the technology has enabled this transformation in this space.
Sure, Rajeshri. So tough to cover this in 3 minutes. I'll really be quick.
No, that's fine, but I'm just like, I wanted to go at least couple rounds, so I'm just giving a heads up.
So before I get to COVID, let me quickly talk about what we started to see especially in manufacturing and in India. And I'm going to be very India specific here. We have about 63 million MSMEs in India, and a lot of them have started to use low cost automation now. Earlier, they were not even connecting any other machines, but at least they started to now connect these machines and do some basic monitoring. And obviously, it's going to be a journey before they eventually move to analytics and AI. But IoT, of course, for low-cost automation. But from a COVID perspective, very interesting set of use cases, Rajeshri. So if you recollect, when the pandemic hit us, India, we were facing a shortage of ventilators. We were importing a lot of these ventilators. And obviously, the costs are very high, sorry. There was a startup in Hyderabad called Levin who built an IoT-based ventilator with an AI fused into it. So you can do remote monitoring of the ventilator. And especially when you have a situation where the persons who are operating these ventilators cannot obviously be in the hospital, they could, remote monitoring obviously helped, so the monitoring of the performance in real time, so that was a great use case. Secondly, I know of a hospital in Kerala where again a startup called Asimo Robotics built an IoT enabled robot which can be remotely connected. And that robot was actually able to dispense food to the patients, spray disinfectant. It also had a video screen where the patient can actually talk to a doctor. So again, a wonderful use case of how they were able to leverage IoT for that. Another example I wanted to give you is a startup again in Bangalore called Drink Prime, and they actually innovated around their business model. They were actually selling water purifiers, and while they were competing against other competitors in their space, the big names, they wanted to disrupt the unorganized market. This unorganized market is made up of people who sell these 20-liter cans. And what they did is they actually innovated around their business model where they built a IoT-enabled device into their water purifier. It had a flow sensor inside, which will measure the flow of water inside. Okay, so what they did is, as a consumer, you actually don't buy the water purifier outright. You only pay based on consumption. So I just pay a nominal installation charge. Then I have a mobile app. Through that app, and I can actually monitor the usage of water. I can order how much of water I want. So just simply put it, it's water as a service. And as I'm actually getting closer to the consumption of, say, if I order 10 liters and I'm consume 9 liters, I get an alert saying that it's time to do a recharge. Okay, so you can actually recharge. It's got a payment integration done, so I can actually again order more water if I want. But again, a wonderful example of how using IoT they were able to innovate around the business model. And very quickly, I want to share that with the vaccine maybe a couple of months away, IoT is going to play a huge role in that, because from a storage standpoint, the vaccines have to be at 2 to -8 degrees centigrade. And if you're talking about the messenger RNA vaccine, which is made by Pfizer and Moderna, there the storage requirements are going to be -70 degrees centigrade. So you need to have very highly sensitive temperature sensors to be able to monitor temperature, at that level. So from a storage standpoint, definitely IoT will play a big part, because you got to make sure that the temperature is maintained at that level. Otherwise, the efficacy of the vaccine is going to be a challenge. That is one. And distribution that's where you're going to see a lot more IoT, because from the manufacturer, it's going to the distributor. From there, it could go to the warehouse and maybe to the hospitals, to the clinics, and all that. And all through that, you constantly need to monitor the location. You constantly need to monitor the temperature. IoT definitely play a big part in that. So this is going to be a huge opportunity actually for startups, and even the logistics providers. In fact, all the logistics providers are actually beefing up their the cold chain infrastructure because of the fact that they're going to store all these vaccines. And that's another example of how IoT will definitely play a big part, especially when the vaccine starts getting distributed. Rajeshri.
Yes, and in fact, this one thing that I would like. It's quite interesting on the when you talked about the water level, the measurements and how it's going to be monitored. So that does that mean also are we looking into like sustaining how much water we are consuming? So which also means we're saving the environment in terms of by monitoring. We don't there's like water wastage is reduced.
Oh, absolutely, yes. In fact, I work a lot with startups. So that's why I'm giving you examples of startups. A startup in Chennai has actually built a water meter which can actually be used in large residential buildings. So it's actually got sensors connected to the water pipes inside that building. So any leakage, it can detect water, that there's a leakage, and smart meters for everybody. So people pay based on usage. So once you know that you're going to be paid, when you're going to pay based on the water that you're consuming, that will definitely instill some discipline in you that I better be careful in terms of water that I'm consuming, right? So you'll be a lot more careful, which is obviously good for the environment, right? So yes. So from a sustainability perspective, it's a great solution. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's a good thing. The point of sustainability. But I'm actually going to come back later on one aspect where I want to understand from a cost perspective as well, because that plays a very integral role too. So over to Harita, and I wanted to just share, like from I said, I'm just loving both the case study and during COVID, how has IoT enabled to address some of the challenges, and has it, since you are based in Europe, so obviously like Sunil did cover India market, what happened in India. Would you want to take a just stab at how did in European market, obviously since it's more advanced, what did you see IoT addressing or enabling during these times?
Yeah, so I have a slightly contradictory view there. I think that it's not like any new technologies have emerged out of this disaster. The only thing that has happened is the inherent winners have pulled up their socks and quickly adopted the existing technologies and made it larger than what we thought it would be. There were things that would have happened in 2025, but we needed it in 2020, so we brought it to life in 2020. So that's one point of view I have. For example, autonomous guided vehicles, right? IGVs, intelligent guided vehicles, they've been around since the 1950s, but nobody bothered actually using them in their full potential, which is happening now. Virtual prototyping, for example, it's not like a radical concept. Virtual prototyping, all the components required like CAD, CAE, computer automated design, everything always existed, and then we added a layer of augmented reality on top of it, and now automotive companies have already, as we are speaking, big automotive giants have already adopted this technology. And then the Internet of Medical Things, that again is not a very revolutionary concept. It's the same IoT platform, and then there's device management, there's analytics, blah blah blah, all of the things that you're all very well aware of. So since I have 3 minutes, I'm going to pick up one of my favorite case studies. We did something with a chemical manufacturing company a couple of years back in the quality control area. So when you make a product, when the product comes out with the most perfect set of parameters that define the product, it's called a golden batch record. And the same thing can be applied to food ingredients, it can be applied to drugs, it can be applied to vaccines, and all of these things. And all of these are what you call the chemical process. So it's a process industry. And what we did with the company was the process itself, we divided it into pseudo stages, which means I'm not just looking at the raw material and the end product, but I'm actually dividing it, slicing it, and looking at monitoring the parameters across the entire length of the product process, so that in case there is any intervention required, I can do it at the right time. So we did that with the company. I'm not able to name the company, but it's one of the biggest chemical manufacturers in Europe. And we divided it in this manner. We went through, so there are 3 things that happen. One is monitoring. So you just look at the various parameters, temperature, pressure, viscosity, blah, 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 whatever makes sense there, across at each of the 8 or 9 stages. The second is it gives you actionable insights. So that means in order to achieve the end state, which is GBR, Golden Batch Record, what are the changes you need to make at this stage? So those are your actionable insights. The third is when everything is over, the best it can do is say that considering that you've already passed the best process that you could have gone through, this is what the end product is going to look like. So these are the three things it does. And I think that this is more relevant than ever now, because we are creating vaccines, we are creating drugs, and it's devastating, but it looks like there is going to be a wave of pandemic. There'll be another wave and things like that. I want to be optimistic, but this will become quite important in the future as well. And in terms of Europe especially, we know the slump that the oil and gas industry has taken. But the interesting thing is, I am personally still involved in conversations with oil and gas companies, discussing what we can do in terms of upping their digital game and things like that. So I feel that we are recovering quite fast, and the inherent winners are anyway going to win, even through such a devastating disaster.
Wow, that's a very insightful and interesting points that you mentioned about how you said one very valid thing, and that's exactly what I've experienced as well, which is to say, yeah, it's not the technology is new or the platform is new. Everything has been there. It's only like everybody did really pulled their socks up and started actually implementing, which were, like you said, what would have happened in 2025, we already made it happen this year, and thanks to pandemic, which is good in terms of the developments. But I'm going to actually, you again said a very interesting thing, and since you're also from Germany, and a very important thing is, at least I know about Germany, is, see, they are the ones who came up with the industry standards, right, and from manufacturing, and they are the global leaders in that. So, and also having all the intelligent manufacturing, like technology center, machines, everything. I'm going to touch upon a little bit on the vertical and want your perspective. Where they are and where do you see them going ahead, and compared to the rest of the world. So I'll come back to you on that. With that, Sham, we want to just quickly take a stab at, in your perspective, a quick case study and pandemic, but most importantly, covering what have you seen happening in the USS market, in the region and the market.
Yeah. So first, I will talk about how we responded to the pandemic. I mean, we did a couple of things. I mean, right? Even before I say this, see, IoT is all about, IoT should be viewed as a tool to solve problems, right? And I think we can solve every problem with IoT because the information is embedded into this physical world. The way humans behave is to detect that information, build context, and take action, right? That's how we react as humans at every moment, right? So IoT probably will extend our capabilities to be able to build the context to get the exact information, right? So that way, I mean, IoT can be used to solve every problem, right? So one of the problem I encountered is early this year, I mean, last year we were doing extremely good with our manufacturing business. And we had a couple of clients who are about to sign in March, and they did not sign because their factories have been shut down. Right? So again, I mean, how do I apply IoT to solve my problem? Then I was thinking, I mean, how do I enable these companies to bring back employees to the work? Right? So we kind of put together a solution, what we call is a back to work campaign. So which is all about how do we detect that a person is sick? I mean, for example, using a thermal detectors, you can scan their body and detect the temperature, and then we can detect using cameras whether they are wearing masks, whether they have the social distancing, using the mobile apps or the BLE or the wearables, and how do we detect this congregations? I mean, how do we help the employees to maintain social distancing? This is one solution we put together with various pieces together, and working with some of the manufacturing clients to bring back the workers to the shop floor. I mean, right? So we are reasonably successful in doing that. I mean, right? So the other thing that is happening due to the pandemic is whether companies now, it is IoT projects are earlier is like, at least an year project earlier. Right? So now many things have changed. I mean, so most of the clients, they want to see their ROI in less than a year. I mean, right? They don't have a separate budget for IoT as an application. They want to see in existing budget, I mean, can I save that money by applying IoT? I mean, right? So that's the one reaction that we are kind of, getting used to, and kind of, being ready to be able to support those kind of clients, I mean, right? So these are two things that, the pandemic is actually forced us to react to. Yeah.
Again, thank you. And I think what one trend that I'm seeing across is, since see these are the kind of forums when we discuss, we know how everybody has done certain things, because in this gamut of so much of information, the deluge of information that's there, it's very difficult to know what every region or how they have fought and what has really happened. But this is a real lot of very good insights, and how you have leveraged the technology and done some of the phenomenal things which wouldn't have been otherwise possible, and also how some of the challenges were met. It's quite interesting, and very I think it's huge value add, and for the industry to also take note of this. So moving to Nomsa, would you want to also pick up that which you want to highlight from a South Africa perspective, and what has enabled, or how during pandemic you encountered certain challenges? I know you already touched upon the education aspect, but do you want to talk about that, or anything that you think is really important for the entire audience and that everybody want to know? That'll be wonderful.
So on our side as an organization, we looked at the combination of artificial intelligence from the machine learning as well as IoT. I'll make an example. So there's two case studies that I can share with the audience. I'm going to try and be a little bit quick. So there's a solution that we use where you do your pre-COVID test, in a sense that from your device, you have an AI tool that will actually be asking you a number of questions. In a sense, it looks at your age, it looks at your pre-existing conditions, and then it looks at the symptoms that you may have at the current moment. And that's why it will then, looking all the elements that it would ask, and then it will be able to tell you to say, do you need to go for testing for COVID or not? Looking at all that information that is made available. So what one does is you train this technology to say, if you would take 5 expert doctors in the country, and they tell you all the things that you need to start looking at or start looking for when you are testing for COVID. So with that information, then you have this bot, or as a doctor, COVID doctor, that will be able to tell you that you do need to test for COVID or not. Why was this important, or why is this important? Is the fact that one needed to continue with the social distancing. You don't want to overload the health systems by going and testing while it's unnecessary for you to go and test. So there is one case study that we had to look at. And the second one is really where then now there's vaccine that needs to be distributed globally. We then also are using a tool. There's a tool that has been developed. It's using IoT as well as AI, where you would then collaborate with your logistics company. So the question was, how can the AI and IoT help in terms of the vaccine partnership? So you want to ensure that vaccine is timely supplied and is distributed, globally. And obviously the vaccine, it comes in different forms, where we need to then look into in terms of the cold storage, the temperatures. This is where you would have a number of IoT devices, that will feed information into the AI to ensure that you can deliver billions of doses and vaccine in less than 12 months. But if you had to then use humans without using technology, we know that it is a fight that will definitely lose. So using IoT as well as AI in the distribution of vaccine, we find it to be very, very important. You look at your customized monitoring of the cold cold chain. You look at the demand identification in terms of remote and undocumented areas. So the AI tool can be used to loosely reconcile local population profiles and patterns of vaccines and inventory that needs to be delivered in different areas. Also, when you look at the let me say, the vastness of the places where you need to deliver, and you look at how difficult it is to actually get health practitioners, to be able to assist in terms of curbing the COVID vaccine. It was important that we needed to develop a tool that will be in a position to assist both those that need to be vaccinated, those that need vaccine, as well as ensuring that it can be taken into different platforms as quickly as possible, looking at the geographic elements of it. So the model can be used to ensure that you can maximize efficiency of delivery, as well as making sure with the monitoring and making sure that the temperatures are set properly. You will not find medication that has expired, or let me say it has lost its sense of effectiveness. So those are some of the elements where we believe that if you can use both AI and IoT, we will be in a position to deliver according to the solutions that we've developed around the COVID pandemic.
Thank you, Nomsat. That's pretty good. I'm going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to request the host because I just want to conclude. I know we are at the end of the hour, but I want to give a quick 1 minute to each of the panelists to give up one key takeaway. And one question which I want them to quickly think and summarize is like a rapid fire round. Sorry, I know we're just hogging over the next session by 5 minutes. I apologize, but I do want to conclude this in the more positive note as we end the year as well. One is give one key takeaway, and the next is I know that everybody did touched upon the challenge, and also you all touched upon the industry verticals, which I'm very glad. So I didn't want to go on to add into another round on that. But the most important is in the future, assuming a pandemic would come, what is that one thing that you would recommend that we all can be prepared, where no matter what happens in such unprecedented events, the world is prepared to handle it? Sunil, sorry, to begin with, Sunil.
Right. So Rajeshri, I think one realization among companies that they have to, for them to have this ingrained in their system, that IoT is not just a nice to have, but a strategic necessity, not just for their survival, but also for their growth. I think that is important. And I think for them to realize that, there are enough drivers now for them to adopt IoT, because cost of devices are coming down, cost of connectivity is coming down, cloud is ubiquitous, and the cost of having data stored on cloud is much, much lower compared to what it was before. So for them also to realize that it's always going to be a journey, and IoT is just a starting point, but then they have to eventually scale up to AI and other technologies. And it's only when you combine technologies together, that's when businesses can get the maximum value. IoT is just a starting point, but make that start quickly, and then you scale up. Yeah. So that's what I would like to summarize in a minute.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Over to Harita.
I will make it really quick. So I'm happy about the question because it combines what Ms. Nomsa was talking about, Mittelstand companies, as we call it in Germany, and what you were talking about, the challenges in Germany, right? So some of the companies, as we said, that have suffered the most, obviously the BMWs and Volkswagens of the world have not, they have suffered, but they can always come back. They have huge cash pockets. But the Mittelstand companies, which are somehow the backbone of the German economy, in many ways have suffered the most. So Hitachi itself is doing a lot in this direction because the whole concept of Hitachi, what we live by is, trying to add value to the society through social innovation and things like that. So there is a new model that we are exploring as of now, which we call B2B2B2B. So we work with, for example, some of the Mittelstand companies, the platform providers, device providers, GSIs, and insurance companies in order to create an entire solution which will be sold to other companies as a service. which means the Mittelstand companies will not now have to deal with huge capexes, and they don't have to deal with the whole ROI dilemma, but we sell them the service. And when the business outcomes are achieved, because we also have an insurance company to take care of any mishap that may happen, they will pay based on that. So that takes away the risk from the Mittelstand companies, and it allows big guys like Hitachi and probably insurance companies and device providers to take a part of the risk and also reap the benefits. So that would be my point of view there.
Thank you, Harita. Over to you, Sham.
Yeah, I mean, I suggest probably a couple of points here. I mean, so to be able to continue to win the IoT business, I mean, irrespective of the pandemic, starting from now, is your ability to deliver ROI. ROI delivery timelines are like in 1 year now, right? That's one thing. The second aspect is that your deliverables. I mean, your deliverables should be in few weeks rather than months and years, right? The third thing is about having skill set. I mean, IoT is very complex. I mean, it has you need breadth and depth of the technologies, all the way from embedded computing to the cognitive computing. I mean, right? You should make sure that you have the right team. I mean, the other important thing, given the pandemic, is that your ability to deliver the services being at a remote location is very, very important. I suggest, an organizations to keep on these four things. I mean, to be able to survive in the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really wonderful. Nomsa, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think for me, I would agree with Ms. Harry to say we need ecosystems. As an organization, you cannot win alone, so let's take advantage of the ecosystems that are available to ensure that businesses continue to thrive. Think of artificial intelligence, ERP, IoT. How do we build fully fledged solutions in the ecosystems that will then deliver the quick return on investment? Because companies are not interested on what has happened. They're interested on the forecasting, what is happening in the future, predictive analysis. We need to use the solutions that we deliver for our clients to make sure that it really adds value. Many organizations, they need to recover from the pandemic. They need to re-energize, and they need to renew, they need to repurpose, the way they work. I believe that digital transformation is not an option, but it's that which you need to do and which you need to adopt as a company. The quicker the adoption, the better.
Namsa, thank you. And with that, I would like to just summarize the entire discussion. So we touched upon what's the present, what has happened in the current times, how everybody has geared up, pulled up their socks and went ahead, which means that whatever the transformation had to happen, it really happened now. And the future, you all gave a suggestion, what should the organizations, the country, everybody, even adapting technology, should look into. Sustainability is a very important element. So we always need to also keep our focus on sustainability. And also telling about collaboration, building ecosystem. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, leverage the ecosystem. And like Harita did mention about how within the European market, it's not about the big guys with cash flows and cash cows could survive, but it's about the tier 2, tier 3. How did it impact them? And most important, if you take even within what Nomsa did mention, to me, it has to be inclusive. I cannot say only the the urban children get educated, or a rural community can, be just left alone. So it means it has to be inclusive. So with all these messages, and like what Sham did also say about how did they buck up, and what are the different things that they did in enabling, as a service model, and also adapting quickly. So it's very important also to have this, wearing the hat of adoption and being ready for any dynamic world that we enter into. So with that, panelists, thank you for all the insights and experiences, case study, real time that you all have shared from your industry verticals. It's been a privilege to be a moderator for this conference and session. Thank you. Looking forward to all staying in touch with you. Hopefully we all cross our ways and collaborate sometime. Wishing you all a very happy Christmas, and to the audience for joining today. Thank you all once again. And now I will pass on to the host.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Rajeshri. And once again, on behalf of GCPIT, I extend my gratitude and appreciation towards the panelists, Ms. Arita, Ms. Nomza, Mr. Sunil, Mr. Syam, and of course the moderator, Ms. Rajeshri, for the great moderation. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry we had to cut short because of the time constraints. We do have a couple of questions, so I would like to request the panelists if you can stay behind and probably answer them in the chat. So yeah, thank you so much for joining in. And
Thank you.
and audience, we're going to take a short break now, and we're going to come back with another power-packed panel discussion on insurance in the digital age. So please stay with us.